I just really want to emphasize that what I'm presenting today is just one of the many issues that we've had to deal with in the city of New Orleans in particular, but the Gulf Coast in general. And with that introduction, I want to just sort of introduce you to where it is that I live. A lot of the work that I've done and a lot of the attention that I've gotten in my work has really been because of where I live. You know, it just happenstance. In other words, because I live in Louisiana on the Gulf Coast and then live in New Orleans, these things have become very personal to me. And so I'm really passionate about it. So thinking that this audience would have people here who were not from the U.S., this is a map of the United States, and Louisiana is at the bottom, so you can see exactly where we're located on the Gulf Coast and in the southern part of the United States of America. And this picture is one that I always show because this is what we have experienced all my young adult life or childhood: explosions from refineries, horrible smells. This is actually in the state, behind the state capitol of Louisiana, where one of the largest explosions we experienced in Louisiana took place, where people felt the boom almost to New Orleans. It was in Baton Rouge, and Baton Rouge is 85 miles from the city of New Orleans. People died, windows were cracked. And during the Reagan administration, the number of inspectors and laws dealing with enforcement were reduced or limited, and we began to see more and more explosions. I mean, the ones that happened when I was a child, I didn't pay much attention to. But once he was put in office and he reduced the number of inspectors, which meant there was less enforcement, we began to see explosions all the time in the 1980s. It was a common occurrence. Race matters, and Jackie did a very good job of basically talking about the fact that it's not income in the United States that is the greatest predictor of disproportionate exposure. It is race. In fact, what we basically found is that Latinos actually do a little bit better than what we do, regardless of income. And nobody can explain it. Nobody understands why it is that black people, rich and poor, do badly in these types of situations, and why it is that Latinos tend to do a little better than us. It's a mystery to some people, but not to us, recognizing that our oppressors were people from the United States. They didn't enslave anyone but us, which means the harshest punishment would be dealt to us, as you can see in Africa, where we live now, where we are now. When you look at the differences between the blacks and the coloreds and the Africans, this is their land, it's taken from them, and they are then given the worst punishment. So we see the same kind of thing when we look at toxic pollution and exposure. In the U.S., people of color make up the majority, 56% of those living in neighborhoods within 3 kilometers of 1.8 miles of the nation's commercial hazardous waste facilities. But the one I want to go to very quickly, the last one, is the one where our center actually did work. And what we found in Louisiana on the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor in particular was that 80% of African Americans living within 5 kilometers or 3 miles are living within 5 miles or 3 kilometers of a toxic facility. What was so disconcerting about that for me was that I lived in the city of New Orleans, which was predominantly black. We're like 69% black. And guess what? We still lived closest to the facilities than did the white, percentage-wise. It's still that. And when we moved to Jefferson Parish, where the racial composition flips, where it is majority white at that time, minority black, guess what? We still lived closest to the toxic facility. So whether we were the majority or the minority, somehow white folks always manage to avoid things that are toxic and nasty and might negatively impact their health and property values. This is a picture that we took. These two pictures have an interesting story. We were in Durban in 2000, that was 2000. And we also worked up and down the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor. Dr. Bullock took all the pictures. So we had the pictures together. We were trying to catalog the pictures. So we had the picture, which is really the Durban picture, and it was stuck in the Norco file. And then in going through trying to put pictures together, I found the other slide. And you know, I looked at the two pictures and realized that although it looked like Louisiana to me, when I looked more closely, it was actually Durban. So you have Durban, South Africa, and Louisiana, Norco, Louisiana, showing the same kind of conditions, the same exposure to the same type of people, the same children, and the parks are in the same place, very closely, and very close in proximity to chemical plants, because this is a gift that communities always get from toxic facilities who are poisoning them. You always get a park or some kind of facility to play outside, when in fact playing outside for the most part is impossible most of the days because you can't breathe. And the air is so thick, you know, with the stench of the chemical plants. Children don't play outside often. This happened to be a good day, and we were able to get that picture. Something that is also very prevalent to us because we live in the Delta, as people do in many other countries, and these are the kinds of things that you have to deal with. But coastal land loss is an issue for those of us who are living in New Orleans within the Mississippi River chemical corridor, or I'd say in coastal Louisiana, coastal U.S. The first has to do with levees that were built to control the Mississippi River. That has caused a lot of problems for us in terms of containing water. Subsidence is a naturally occurring phenomenon, which is basically sinking land. Then we have storm surges that we have to deal with because of where we live, and of course hurricanes, but the one that really irks me the most, or the thing that really bothers me, is oil and gas drilling and that particular infrastructure that is destroying our coastlines. I remember, it may have been about 8 years ago, that all of a sudden Shell Oil was very much interested in wetlands, other marshes. We couldn't understand why. They wanted to protect the marshlands, and then we found out that it was because all of their huge pipelines were being exposed. So they needed the marshlands to protect their pipelines. It wasn't that they wanted to protect the marshes, but that was a good hook for them. You know, we're interested in saving the coast. And just about everybody knows about Hurricane Katrina, which took place in the city of New Orleans. At least the impact that occurred in the city of New Orleans. It didn't occur in the city, but we're the ones who are all on television because the effects were just so devastating. And I think we really thought we had lost New Orleans, that it would never be there again. And this, of course, had a lot to do with climate change, because some people don't know it, but Katrina never hit the city of New Orleans. It never did. What happened was basically storm surge, because the size of the hurricane was so humongous that when it passed through, it was all like almost like the dog wagging his tail, what it left behind. Because the wind basically almost picked up the waters out of the Lake Pontchartrain and pushed them back. And although we didn't, so right after the hurricane, people were out sweeping, and ooh, it missed us, you know, really happy because nothing happened. And then hours later, people began to see something rolling towards them. It was dark. This is the way they described it. They saw something rolling towards them, and it was dark, and it was getting closer. It was water, because when the wind dies down, right, it pushed the water almost out of the basin. When the wind dies down, what does the water do? It comes rolling back, fiercely, rolling back into place. And of course, with the wetlands no longer being there to be that buffer where all of the waves just hit the marshes over and over again, so that by the time it gets to the city of New Orleans, it's calm. Well, there was nothing to calm it, and so it overtopped, and went under because the levees were inferior, the levees, and completely destroyed New Orleans, and the whole city was evacuated. And right now we have over 100,000 people who have not been able to return for mostly political and economic reasons. They are unable to return. And this takes us to corporate influence in the United States. When we look at disasters in particular, because of corporate influence, we basically have no disaster prevention and mitigation, I guess, laws are right for this to happen. There are no permits. I'm going to change the way I'm saying this. We are allowed to poison communities because we are giving permits to particular facilities that are toxic. I try to explain this to students sometimes when we talk about polluting facilities and we talk about how people live near clusters of facilities that are all toxic. And you wonder, how is this possible? Well, it's possible through the permitting process. And over time, what you realize is that we have no right to stop a permit, even though it's of toxic chemicals or chemicals that give us cancer and make us sick. The permitting process is in place to permit the emissions of toxics into the air, water, and soil. Every time we've tried to stop a particular facility from coming, it's legal for them to poison us. And that's a point that was pretty hard for me to understand, that it's legal for you to do this, so you can actually destroy my community, you can kill off my family members, you can destroy all of the vegetation around, the fish can die in the water, the squirrels are no longer there, the moss on the trees, is gone. And so when you go to fight your case, what you find out is that it's absolutely legal. And so we're trying to find loopholes in the permitting paperwork is what I'll call it, to stop them from erecting a new facility that can absolutely poison us, and we do not. And in Louisiana, it's really very interesting because I went to school in New York, and while I was up there, all you heard about was the Great Lakes and New Jersey being just the worst place. And New Jersey began putting in laws to prevent polluting facilities from destroying the water by just letting toxins run off into the lakes. Well, what I began to see is that at that particular point, many of the facilities in New Jersey and up that way left New Jersey and they came to Louisiana. And what they found out in Louisiana was that they didn't even have to abide by the rules that they had in New Jersey before they destroyed those waterways. It was just so corrupt and so easy. And so in 1984, we basically found out that all of the facilities up and down the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor were emitting over 700 million pounds of carcinogens into the air, water, and soil. 700 million pounds. Today it's at about 267 million. Texas, you know how large Texas is. They're just a little bit higher than us for a more massive place. Whereas in Louisiana, it's an 85-mile stretch of land, releasing almost as much as is released in Texas. Like, you can't put Texas and Louisiana in the same hand at all. It's just really small. So you get the feeling of the amount of corruption and influence that corporations have in terms of permitting. Not only do we not seem to have any control over them eroding our coastlines or poisoning our air and water related to permits, but we seem to have nothing in place for mitigation, prevention from all of these things happening to us. I think we found that out. It was made very clear, right after Katrina, when all of this money was racing into the city, and we would go to all of these meetings with the Army Corps of Engineers. And so when we finally asked, well, what projects are in place? We find out the only project that's in place is a project that's going to make it safer where rich white people live. Although they were least affected, they got the majority of the money. We've done an equity analysis that I didn't bring Jackie that would have shown recovery money and how it has been spent. And the truth of the matter is the majority of the recovery money has gone to the downtown to reverse that. and uptown, where rich white people live, in the planning districts where these particular people and these businesses are. So there's been absolutely no equity. The right to recover, we found out we had no right to recover at all. You know, Monique's in the audience, an environmental lawyer, and she explained to me about human rights and internally displaced people and how the United States has treaties with other countries to protect their rights. But right at home, we don't have those same rights. Or if we have them, then make certain that we're not able to utilize them. In the claims process, when we looked at Katrina and then BP, you see basically the same thing happening. And we have no rights to the BP claims process completely. You submitted a claim, BP was in complete control of that, and the majority of people did not get compensation for help or even for work. You know, lost wages, lost businesses. All of that has been a struggle, and BP has basically put things in place to make certain that they don't pay us what we deserve. Oh, one more thing. Back? Okay. Jackie Patterson sent these figures to me last night, and I found it very interesting. Just looking at 2010, the year of the disaster, look at BP lobbying. The amount of money they spent to lobby in the U.S., $7,405,000. And then when you look at BP profits for that same year, it was $16 billion. And they had some write-offs because of the accident. So first of all, you destroy our coast, you destroy our livelihood, you destroy our food source, and then your profits are even bigger because you get to write off any money you spent on cleanup. So their profits were $16 billion. It's amazing.